And we are now joined in the studio by Dr. Alexandra Maertens of Johns Hopkins University. Thank you so much, Dr. Maertens, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're going to start with sustainability. The first question for you is, how do we need to shift the way we train toxicologists and chemists to think more about sustainability?
I think it's very important that chemists start getting more training in their graduate program about toxicology. A lot of them are trained to make very functional chemicals, but nobody ever told them, oh, by the way, you have to minimize human toxicity while you're at it. So when they go get jobs, working for Dow or DuPont or wherever, they're suddenly introduced to a world where they do have to think about that, but it wasn't really incorporated in their training from the beginning. In the case of toxicologists, I think they need to start thinking beyond, the sort of very narrow ways we've been taught to think about toxicity, and start to think a little bit more about how we can ask, really relevant questions about how toxic chemicals are impacting human health. Right now, most toxicologists are trained on animal models, so they learn to look at, to see if a chemical is going to kill a rat, which is great, but what we care about is it going to cause endocrine disruption if it's in the water supply? If it's used in plastic and it rubs off on the food, is that going to cause a problem? That's a more complicated question, but that's really what we need to get to.
Make it more relatable to everyday life.
Yeah.
Just bring it down to the basics. Why will an interdisciplinary approach help with this shift?
So I think a lot of toxicologists don't really think about chemistry in their training. It's really informed in a lot of instances by thinking about the biology of it. But in a lot of cases, or in all cases, fundamentally toxicity is driven by chemistry. And if you understand the chemistry better, you can make better tools to predict toxicity, and that can help guide chemists to designing safer molecules. So there's a lot of ways that we can sort of take toxicology from being a science that worries about chemicals after they're released into the environment, and that really helps chemists design chemicals from the get-go that are less toxic, if we sort of broaden our focus a little bit more and start getting both toxicologists and chemists to think about the other side of the equation, right from the beginning.
Thank you. And what kind of impact would all of this ultimately have on products in different populations affected by the environment?
So a lot of the mistakes that have been made in terms of releasing toxic products have been because people have not really thought about the broader impacts that a shift could have. So for example, you can replace a chemical that that's going to be a neurotoxin for the workers. They'll replace it with a chemical that's not a neurotoxin, but if it's released into the water, it could be profoundly ecotoxic. So people need to think more broadly about the chemicals, and this avoids a lot of the things that we've seen, which are basically burden shifting. One community, gets rid of a problem, but they're just shifting it onto workers or shifting it onto the general population, or in many instances shifting it to a different country or a disadvantaged community. So thinking about these issues in a broader context can avoid a lot of those problems that we've had in the past.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra Maertens, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.